Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about why luxury cars were failing, but now they're having a resurgence. Before we get in the video, I do want to mention, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, I'm going to include a link to my car buying guide in the description down below. It's extremely affordable and it'll save you a bunch of money. Let's get right into the video. So let's talk about luxury cars. Now, they've had a pretty interesting history because they didn't exactly always exist, right? We had the creation of the car, and when the car was first created, it was a luxury to just own a car. But cars became more mainstream as time progressed, and so since there were different gaps in the market, different manufacturers filled those gaps, and one of the gaps was obviously, a luxury brand, and so you had multiple car makers fill that niche. One of the first would have been Mercedes-Benz, which they actually technically invented the car. So they invented the car, and then they invented the luxury car. That's pretty cool. But continuing along, luxury cars have evolved a massive amount. In the past, again, like I said, it was a luxury just to own a car. And then it was like, okay, to be a luxury car, you have to have, unique styling, and then you have to have a slightly nicer interior than a basic car. And then, you got to have a powertrain that's a little bit more higher performance, or a little bit smoother, a little bit quiet, whatever it may be, right? To make the car different from the mainstream cars that are being sold on the market. And that trend has continued pretty much into the modern day, because if you look at luxury cars, they look a little bit different than a regular car, right? Most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time, they have nicer interiors than a regular car. They usually have a powertrain that is either higher performance or, is a little bit more refined compared to the powertrains that you see in normal cars. This comes at a higher price, right, as well. And so there's a bunch of upgrades you get with a luxury car, but luxury cars were actually on the decline before COVID. And the reason that they were on the decline before COVID was because of what regular automakers were doing to compete against luxury car makers. And I know that might seem weird. Why would these regular car makers be competing with luxury car makers? And that was just to increase their market share. They're like, okay, you know what? This is what people are looking for in certain types of cars. Let's put this in our car, and then we'll be able to pull buyers from those luxury brands because we'll offer the same features at a lower price. And this was consistently happening and still consistently happening to this day. And so what you saw is regular car makers that were releasing, pretty basic cars, to then they were releasing cars with nicer interiors like luxury cars and luxury car features. I mean, just look at it, right? If you went and bought a car from a regular automaker like Toyota, 20, 30 years ago, you're going to get a pretty basic car, right? Probably crank windows, cloth seats, and maybe air conditioning if you're lucky, right? Nothing too crazy. But nowadays, you can go into a Toyota dealership, for example, again, we're using Toyota as an example, and you can get a car with leather seats that are heated and cooled, and a panoramic sunroof, and dual zone climate, or even in some of their larger vehicles, tri-zone climate, right? Just all these nice luxury amenities that just weren't available in those cars in the past, but are available now. And so it kind of shifted buyer dynamics, because buyers were like, oh, well, all I care about is having a comfortable car, and most modern cars drive pretty well, right? And, have a few nice luxury features. And so it was pushing buyers away from luxury brands, because they're like, oh, I'm paying 2 times, 3 times, 4 times as much money for this car and getting the same features that I'm getting in the non-luxury car. So why is there all of a sudden a resurgence with luxury cars? And it comes down to a couple of things. So first off, after COVID happened, we had a K-shaped recovery, right? Part of the population continued to decline economically, whereas another part of the population, after the initial decline of COVID, started to rapidly increase in wealth. And because of this, right, there became a higher demand for luxury cars again, because people that didn't have money before all of a sudden had a lot of money. And then there were people that already had a lot of money. Now they had even more money. And so they're like, you know what? I have way more money than I ever need. And so they're going to start going and buying stuff with it and having fun with it. And so that is basically what's happened over the last few years. And it's caused this massive resurgence in luxury cars. A lot of luxury automakers have had their best years ever. Bentley is a great example. 2021 was their best sales year ever from a profit perspective and from a volume perspective as well. And that is purely a luxury car brand. And so that's the first part of it. The second part that I see as a car journalist, because I review cars for a living, is that luxury car makers are focusing on differentiating themselves from regular cars in a massive way yet again. So like I said, leading up to, COVID and everything, luxury car makers were kind of getting lazy and just counting on people purchasing their cars based on the badge that was on the front end and the unique styling that they had, and not necessarily on the features. Whereas now, a lot of these luxury car makers are fully redesigning their entire lineups, and these new platforms that they're putting their cars on and the features they're adding to their cars differentiate them so much from a regular car that not only are you paying for the name, you're actually getting a car that is just better in every aspect, from a looks perspective to an interior perspective to a feature perspective as well. And so this is also kind of feeding in to the resurgence of luxury cars. And I'd have to say I'm all about it, because I think that there needs to be multiple markets, right, for the car industry to advance as a whole. Because ultimately, if luxury cars continued to decline like they were and people just basically stopped buying them, then we wouldn't see the massive improvements in cars that we've seen over the last few years from a safety tech perspective to a feature perspective, because luxury cars are typically early adopters with a lot of crazy features, and then they kind of leak down into regular cars. And if you get rid of that segment, well, are regular car makers really going to push the envelope all that much to get these new features? Not really. So I think it's just kind of like a win-win situation for everyone. And that's pretty much going to sum things up for today's video. So I want you guys to let me know what you think of this, and to let's talk about this, right? Do you think that luxury car makers are kind of going in the right direction with how they've changed things over the last few years in terms of what they're offering? Or do you think that they're still just overpriced and that you're better off just buying a regular car? I'd like to hear that. And again, link to the course in the description down below. I'll see you guys.